Millions know Jay Blades for his calming voice and warm smile, and Suzie Fletcher for her unmatched grace and delicate hands restoring memories. But behind the joyful moments of the repair shop, something was quietly breaking. For years, Jay and Suzie remained silent about the pressure, pain, and personal battles they endured while the cameras kept rolling. Until now. This is the truth they've finally decided to share. And it's more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. When the repair shop first aired in 2017, it wasn't expected to become a national treasure. The concept was simple. Bring in broken heirlooms, watch skilled artisans restore them, and see emotional reunions unfold. But this unassuming show tapped into something much deeper, a yearning for connection, nostalgia, and healing in a world spinning too fast. In a television landscape filled with high-drama reality shows and constant noise, the repair shop offered quiet, tender moments. No manufactured conflict, no shouting matches, just stories, real stories, wrapped in the smell of old wood, gentle sanding, and soft background music. And at the heart of that comforting calm were two people who didn't ask to become icons, but somehow did. Jay Blades and Suzie Fletcher. Jay Blades wasn't polished. He didn't fit the mold of traditional television presenters. But maybe that's exactly why audiences gravitated toward him. With his distinctive glasses, warm East London accent, and natural empathy, Jay brought not just presence, but heart. He listened, really listened, to guests as they recounted their memories tied to the items they brought in. And that made viewers feel seen, even from their couches at home. He didn't just narrate stories. He held them. As guests cracked open their grief or joy, Jay stood by like an anchor, steady, grounded, kind. What most didn't know at the time was that Jay's ability to comfort others came from a place of having to comfort himself for much of his life. But in the early years of the show, those truths remained carefully tucked away. Suzie Fletcher, the calm and composed leather expert with a soothing voice and a steady hand, became one of the show's most beloved figures. She wasn't just restoring old saddles, bags, or chairs. She was helping stitch back pieces of people's lives. But Suzie's skill wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Every object that came to her bench told a story, and she treated each one with deep respect. What viewers didn't realize was that Suzie was working through her own grief. Her decision to join the repair shop came shortly after losing her husband, a loss that nearly broke her. But Suzie didn't speak of her pain. Instead, she poured it into the quiet, methodical work of mending, as if fixing the world around her might slowly mend the world inside her. The repair shop became more than a series. It became a sanctuary, not just for the items that walked through its doors, but for the people watching from home. Grandfathers' watches, mothers' wedding dresses, children's old toys. Every episode was a tribute to memory, love, and time. Jay and Suzie became unofficial guardians of those memories. They helped people not just remember their loved ones, but reconnect with them. Often that act of restoration was more emotional than physical. In many ways, they were repairing something no glue or polish could fix. Grief itself. The workshop was a set, yes, but it became a sacred space where brokenness was honored, not hidden. And every episode was an invitation for viewers to do the same in their own lives, to slow down, reflect, and maybe even forgive. As the show's popularity grew, so did the emotional stakes. The stories became more intense, the items more fragile, and the responsibility heavier. For Jay and Suzie, being part of those moments wasn't just touching, it was draining. Every memory handed to them came with a story, sometimes joyful, often painful, and they held them all with grace. But what fans didn't see was the cost of carrying so many hearts in their hands. They were mending broken pieces on camera, while quietly holding together their own. And for a long time, No one asked how they were doing. To the public, Jay Blades was the steady soul of the repair shop, always smiling, always uplifting. But away from the cameras, Jay was carrying something much heavier. Long before the fame, he had battled homelessness, poverty, and a deep sense of abandonment. As a young man, Jay found himself sleeping in his car, feeling invisible and hopeless. These were not struggles easily forgotten, and though success brought new stability, the emotional scars remained. What few knew was that, at the peak of the repair shop's popularity, Jay suffered a mental health breakdown. He later revealed that he had even contemplated ending his life. The pressure to always be the strong one, both on screen and in real life, became unbearable. Jay admitted that it took therapy, solitude, and painful reflection to pull himself back. In helping others heal, he had forgotten to heal himself. Suzie Fletcher's calm demeanor became her trademark. She had an almost meditative stillness when she worked, and viewers found comfort in her steadiness. But Suzie's quiet wasn't just professionalism, it was armor. Her husband had passed away from cancer, and in the aftermath, Suzie was left with a hollow space in her life. Grief, for her, wasn't loud. It was silent, lingering, unrelenting. It followed her into the workshop every day, nestled between the stitches and seams. She kept her sorrow close to the chest, speaking only sparingly about her loss. But her decision to join the repair shop wasn't just about restoring items. It was about restoring herself. Suzie often said she found healing in the act of creating something whole again. In each piece of worn leather, in each tear she mended, she found fragments of her own resilience. As the show grew into a beloved cultural touchstone, Jay and Suzie were thrust into unexpected celebrity. Strangers approached them in the street with tears, gratitude, and stories of their own losses. While it was humbling, it was also exhausting. For Jay, the public's love came with constant pressure to be perfect, to always inspire, always smile, always carry the emotional weight. For someone with past trauma and mental health struggles, the exposure became both blessing and burden. Suzie, ever private, found the sudden attention jarring. Her grief had once been private and quiet. Now she was being asked about it in interviews. And while she handled it with grace, the intrusion was still real. Neither of them had set out to become famous. They just wanted to fix things. But now their own personal repairs were happening in front of millions. Every episode of the repair shop carried a flood of emotions. A widow's locket, a veteran's medal, a child's toy, long gone and missed. Jay and Suzie didn't just restore these items, they held the stories behind them. But emotional labor, even when done with love, takes a toll. Week after week, year after year, Jay and Suzie became repositories for other people's pain. And while that pain was often transformed into beauty, it didn't leave them unscarred. Jay once confessed that he would sometimes cry in his car after filming, overwhelmed by the depth of stories he had witnessed. Suzie, too, admitted that certain pieces triggered memories of her husband, making it difficult to keep her composure. They carried these stories like precious artifacts. But even precious things grow heavy over time. By the show's 5th season, subtle shifts began to appear. Jay started taking occasional breaks from filming. Suzie seemed quieter, more reserved. For most viewers, the changes were imperceptible. But for those paying close attention, the emotional fatigue was showing. They were still delivering heartfelt work. But it was clear that the emotional weight of so many years was beginning to settle into their bones. Both Jay and Suzie had spent years pouring themselves into the broken treasures of others. But their own cracks were no longer easy to hide, and soon those cracks would lead to difficult decisions and long-awaited truths. In late 2024, loyal viewers of the repair shop began to notice Jay Blades was missing from new episodes. Social media buzzed. Was he sick? Was he fired? Had something happened behind the scenes? Then came the quiet confirmation. Jay had taken a leave from filming. The reasons weren't dramatic, but they were deeply human. He needed time. Time to breathe. Time to rest. Time to find the joy that had once defined his work. Jay would later say that he'd poured so much of himself into the repair shop that he didn't know who he was outside of it. The constant emotional storytelling, the burden of carrying the public's admiration, the pressure to always be okay, it had caught up to him. Just weeks after Jay stepped back, Suzie Fletcher made a rare solo appearance on a BBC radio segment. In her soft, measured voice, she spoke for the first time about the emotional toll of the show. She called the repair shop a gift, but admitted it had stirred grief she hadn't fully processed. She described nights of crying after episodes involving lost spouses. She admitted there were times she wanted to quit, not because of the work, but because of the memories the work triggered. Her voice cracked when she spoke of her husband. "Some days," she said, "I felt like I was sewing my heart back." Together, piece by piece, listeners were stunned. For years, Suzie had seemed like a rock. Now, they saw her humanity, raw and unfiltered. Behind the scenes, things were changing. The producers knew they had something special with the repair shop, but they also knew it relied heavily on Jay and Suzie's emotional investment. Crew members reported that Jay sometimes arrived at filming looking exhausted, emotionally withdrawn. The workshop remained a place of healing, but it also became a space of quiet burnout. Rumors swirled that the show's growing pressure to deliver tear-jerker stories was affecting the hosts. Some reports suggested that emotionally intense pieces were scheduled back-to-back, not intentionally cruel, but without realizing the mental toll it took on the presenters. Jay and Suzie never blamed the show, but they did admit that the emotional weight was unsustainable. In a powerful podcast interview, their first joint appearance after Jay's break, the two sat side by side in a quiet studio and told the truth. Jay spoke first. "I love what we've done," he said, "but I also lost parts of myself in the process. I had to step away to remember who Jay is. Beyond the camera, beyond the workshop." Suzie nodded, her eyes moist. "I used to think restoring items helped me avoid my grief, but eventually it just brought it to the surface. I couldn't keep pretending I was fine." Their honesty was staggering. They didn't criticize the show or the audience. They just told the truth about emotional exhaustion, about grief, about boundaries, about survival, and fans around the world responded with overwhelming compassion. Messages poured in. "Thank you for speaking up. Take your time. You saved us. Now save yourselves." The aftermath of their confession caused a ripple effect within the repair shop's production. The BBC made adjustments. Filming schedules were relaxed, breaks between emotionally intense stories were added, and therapy support was offered to the cast. More importantly, the tone of the show began to shift. It became a little more balanced, still heartfelt, but with more space for lightness, humor, and joy. Jay eventually returned, not full-time, but when he felt ready. Suzie continued on, but with clearer boundaries and less pressure to carry the emotional weight. Their pain had sparked a necessary evolution, and for the first time in years, they were not just restorers, they were being restored too. After his emotional departure and raw confession, Jay Blades slowly re-entered the public space, but on his own terms. He didn't rush back to the full-time demands of the repair shop. Instead, he focused on projects that refueled him: community outreach, men's mental health advocacy, and small workshops where he helped young people find confidence through craftsmanship. Jay also released a memoir, not just about the repair shop, but about identity, pain, and learning to say no. It quickly became a bestseller. His vulnerability struck a chord with readers, many of whom had seen themselves in Jay's quiet breakdown. Fans cheered when he made a return cameo on the repair shop. He smiled. He looked rested. And most importantly, he looked free. Suzie Fletcher also stepped into a new season of life. Though she remained on the show, she became more intentional about the projects she accepted. Behind the scenes, she became a quiet advocate for mental health resources within the BBC production system. She also began speaking more openly about her late husband, not as a source of pain, but as a part of her story that shaped her gift for empathy. One of her most powerful moments came when she restored a saddle for a widow who had lost her partner in a riding accident. As Suzie handed over the restored piece, her hands shook. "I understand your grief," she whispered. The woman cried. So did Suzie. So did the crew. That moment became one of the most shared clips in the repair shop's history. In response to Jay and Suzie's openness, the show made real changes. It began featuring more lighthearted restorations, toys, old radios, whimsical family heirlooms, not just tragic backstories. The goal wasn't to remove emotion, but to balance it with joy and celebration. New artisans were brought in, giving Jay and Suzie more breathing space. Audiences embraced the changes. Ratings didn't drop. In fact, they grew. Viewers seemed to crave a show that embraced vulnerability but didn't exploit pain. Thanks to Jay and Suzie, the repair shop evolved and became even more beloved. Jay and Suzie's choice to speak up broke an unspoken rule in television. Don't show the cracks, but they did, and it mattered. They reminded us that empathy has a cost, that giving emotionally week after week isn't sustainable without care and support. They showed that strength isn't about pushing through, it's about knowing when to stop, when to rest, and when to ask for help. Their courage has inspired not just fans, but fellow castmates and even producers. Quietly, behind the scenes, many others began speaking up about burnout. A culture of silence was broken. And it all started because two beloved artisans decided that telling the truth was more important than protecting an image. Jay Blades and Suzie Fletcher will always be remembered as the heart of the repair shop. But now, their legacy is about more than furniture and leatherwork. It's about honesty, about healing, about using one's platform to protect not just antiques, but human souls. They didn't walk away bitter. They didn't attack the show. They simply said, "We're tired, we've hurt, and we need space to breathe." And that honesty, in a world of carefully crafted perfection, is nothing short of revolutionary. If you've ever found comfort in the repair shop or felt moved by Jay and Suzie's courage, let us know in the comments. Share your favorite memory, or a time their story helped you through your own. And if you're feeling worn out, take their lesson to heart. Your well-being matters too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. We've got more powerful stories coming your way.